let's start with the 6 channels. This all comes from the work of Paul Ekman, and he identified that when we're communicating with other people, we're always communicating with these 6 channels. And that's our face, our facial expressions and what we show and what we don't show, our voice, the pitch, tone, pace. We are giving physiological signs, everything from our flush response to sometimes our pulse. We are giving our body language signals away, usually neck down. We leak quite a lot, lovely word. And then we think about our interactive style, whether we take turns well, how we get on with other people. And then finally, we look at the content, the words we choose and how we use them. And we're constantly looking at those 6 channels. But the first thing we have to consider is how those 6 channels are baselined. So what is typical for that individual? And then also what is typical within the context. So if you are interviewing somebody, for example, it's quite typical for that person to be more agitated or more anxious. So you wouldn't think that was of any particular interest. But where you do see something that slightly differs, where you've got a change from the baseline or a change from the context of one of those 6 channels, we call that a point of interest. And when you're reading people, we're always interested in that point of interest, with pin as we call it. And we're looking for 3 pins within 5 seconds of any trigger to say, that's a thing. Without it, it's not a thing, because we're always looking for clusters, and we'll keep coming back to this point time and time again. Seeing someone scratching their nose, don't make it mean that person's lying to me. They could just have an itchy nose. Today we're going to focus on 3 of these channels. First, we're going to understand what are we actually looking for. Now, we see any kind of reaction to a trigger as being under these 3 R's. There's reflex, reaction and response. Reflex, this is what you don't control. It happens under half a second. And this is our actual reflexes, blink response if someone blows in your eye, and it happens so quickly. Very, very fast neural circuits. And then we have our reactions, and this can be our emotions, tears, a smile, something where we're genuinely feeling what we're feeling and we show it. And that happens at about 750 microseconds, or just under 3/4 of a second. And then we have time to school our face, time to think about what we want to show the world, our response. And that takes a second. So there's always a gap between our genuine feeling at 3/4 of a second and what we show at a second. And people like me and people who are trained to see it will always see that little gap. We call it leakage. So not a nice word, but that's what we call it. Interestingly, most people will actually spot it. They may not know what they spotted, but they'll feel the difference. So you're looking for this gap, because that gap between what we think and what we feel is where 2 different parts of our brain are competing for resource. That's cognition and emotion. It's why the world's cheapest lie detector test is stirring your tea. Because if you stir, you can't lie at the same time. So if you ask somebody a question while they're stirring the tea, if they're going to lie to you, they have to stop and then carry on stirring. Use that with care. But of course, they could just stop because they're questioning, why are you asking me that? The emotion could be shock or surprise, so don't just assume they're about to lie to you. But that's what we're looking for all the time, is this gap between the reaction and the response. So, as a quick test of response, have a quick look at this picture and decide instinctively, if you met this person in a room, which one's the real smile? Because this is where we have to use our absolute instinct to be able to judge huge amounts of data coming in at once, to judge whether somebody is being genuine with us or not.